All right, today we're jumping into the epic story of one of mythology's greatest warriors, the legendary Irish hero whose story has been told for something like 2,000 years, Cú Chulainn. So, to really get a handle on his story, you have to start with a question. Who was Ireland's Achilles? Because just like the Greek hero, Cú Chulainn's life is this incredible mix of unbelievable strength, fierce pride, and a fate that was sealed by prophecy. It's a story of glory, for sure, but also profound tragedy. See, he wasn't always called Cú Chulainn. He was actually born Setanta, and his background was, well, literally divine. His father was Lug, a super powerful god. And right from the very beginning, his path was totally laid out. He was going to achieve everlasting fame, but his life would be tragically short. And that brings us right to the first major part of his story, the moment that would define him forever. This is how a young boy named Setanta became the legendary Hound of Chulainn. Even as a little kid, his power was just off the charts. The stories say he was so strong that any weapon you gave him would just shatter in his hands. The only ones that could actually handle his might were the ones that belonged to the king of Ulster himself, Conchobar Mac Nessa. So how did he get that famous name? Well, it's an amazing story. King Conchobar invites young Setanta to a feast at the house of a smith named Chulainn. The only problem is, he forgets to tell Chulainn that the boy is running late, so Chulainn, thinking all his guests are there, lets his monstrous guard dog loose. When Setanta family shows up, he has to kill the beast just to save his own skin. Chulainn is devastated, so Setanta makes him a promise. I'll be your guard dog, your Cú, until you can raise a new one. And from that day forward, he was known as Cú Chulainn. And what's just incredible is how he completely embraced his fate. He overhears a druid's prophecy when he's just 7 years old, and he immediately demands his first set of weapons. He knew exactly what he was doing, choosing a short life in exchange for eternal glory. The tragic hero was born right then and there. But, raw power isn't everything. To become the warrior of legend, he had to seriously hone his skills. And this next chapter of his life took him away from Ireland and over to the shadows of Scotland. And what was his motivation? Love, of course. He fell for a woman named Emer, but her dad was not having it. He sent Cú Chulainn on what he thought was an impossible mission. Go train with the terrifying warrior woman Scathach on the Isle of Skye. He was pretty much hoping the kid wouldn't make it back alive. But he did survive, and under Scathach's training, he mastered the arts of war and was given his signature weapon. And this thing, the gay bulg, it was just terrifying. I mean, it wasn't your average spear. You threw it with your foot, and once it was in someone, it would explode into dozens of barbs. A weapon designed for pure, horrific devastation. While he's there, he also runs into Aifé, who is Scathach's rival warrior. He beats her in combat, and as part of their truce, they have a son together, Conla. But Cú Chulainn leaves before the baby is born, and that decision right there, it tragically sets the stage for his greatest sorrow down the line. So all this training forges him into the ultimate warrior, just in time for his greatest test, the Táin Bó Cúailnge, or the cattle raid of Cooley. This is where Cú Chulainn literally becomes the sole defender of his entire kingdom. And let this sink in. He wasn't some seasoned general leading troops into battle. He was just a teenager, 17 years old, standing alone against the invading armies of Queen Meab of Connacht. So how could one kid possibly face an entire army? Well, it's because of a curse that left all the other warriors of Ulster completely incapacitated with, of all things, labor pains. But Cú Chulainn, because of his divine blood, was immune. To fight against these impossible odds, he had to unleash something terrifying from within himself, the ríastrad, or the warp spasm. And to give you an idea of the sheer horror of this transformation, just listen to this description from the old text. His body made a furious twist inside his skin. He sucked one eye so deep into his head. The other eye fell out along his cheek. His lungs and his liver flapped in his mouth and throat. Yeah, this was not some noble battle rage. It was a grotesque, body-altering frenzy. When the warp spasm took hold, he wasn't a hero anymore. He was a monster. A force of nature that literally could not tell the difference between his friends and his enemies. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse, where he would literally build walls out of the bodies of the people he killed. But as you can imagine, this level of violence and a life that's been mapped out by prophecy, it all comes at a terribly steep price. That glory he chose as a kid was about to demand payment in pure sorrow. And his life just begins to unravel in the most heartbreaking ways. First, the son he had with Ife, Conla, shows up in Ireland years later. Bound by a code of honor, Conla won't tell anyone his name, so he ends up fighting his own father. Cú Chulainn kills him with the Gaebolg, only realizing who he is as the boy is dying in his arms. If that wasn't enough, he's also tricked into breaking his sacred vows, his geasa, like his vow to never eat dog meat, which was an animal sacred to his very name. All of this left him spiritually and physically broken, just in time for his final battle. His death was just as fated as his life. His enemies had forged 3 magical spears, and it was prophesied that each one would kill a king. The first one kills his charioteer, the king of drivers. The second one kills his favorite horse, the king of horses. And the third, well, the third strikes down Cú Chulainn himself, a king among all warriors. But even in death, he was defiant. Mortally wounded, he literally strapped himself to a standing stone so that he could die on his feet, sword in hand, facing his enemies. They were so terrified of him that they only dared to get close after a raven landed on his shoulder, which was the only way they knew for sure that he was finally dead. But a story this powerful, it doesn't just end with death. Cú Chulainn's legend transformed over the centuries, and he became this really potent and complex symbol in the modern world. And what's really fascinating here is how his image has been claimed by completely opposing political groups in Ireland. For many Irish nationalists, he's a symbol of heroic sacrifice for the nation. You can see that in the famous statue in Dublin commemorating the 1916 Easter Rising. But for some Ulster loyalists, he's seen as an ancient hero defending Ulster from southern enemies, and he appears in their murals too. His influence goes way beyond just politics. He was a huge figure for writers like W.B. Yeats during the Celtic Revival. His final moments were immortalized in that famous sculpture, and his story is still a core part of what school children learn about their own heritage in Ireland today. I mean, his journey is really something else. He went from being a demigod warrior in an ancient saga to a contested political icon and a cornerstone of national culture. His violent, tragic, and glorious story is just as powerful today as it ever was. Which really leaves us with one last thought. Was he a hero, a monster, or just a symbol? And what does it mean for a figure like this, for any ancient legend, to still have such a powerful hold on us in the modern world?